Good afternoon. My name is Jen Randall, and I had the privilege of working with John most recently at Maestro. Lori, Teslin, and Jake are so touched and honored by your presence here today as we celebrate the life of John. Lori is grateful for the outpouring of love and support that she's seen in the last several months. She has asked some special friends, as well as colleagues, to share their memories and stories about John's life today. My personal experience with John has been as a colleague and a friend at Maestro, and I will be sharing memories from our team at Maestro. In addition to myself, one of John's children, Jake, as well as two other close friends, Bradley and Glenn, will also be sharing their memories of John. It's impossible to capture the warmth and character of John in words. Nothing says it better than the man himself. We've captured some moments in video of John at work, and we'd like to start with that today.
So, he's rolling?
Oh, show off. Wow.
You want more energy? You gotta catch me in the morning.
So the start line is here, the finish line is also here. Do you know the course?
Yeah, snake around, go around the outside.
Yes, okay. Any questions for me?
Yeah, why am I doing this? Fun. We don't have any fun here. It's all hard work. It's terrible. Stop laughing. Will I say it? To you or to them?
Everything you have today soon can be gone away. Yesterday I had no sorrow, but here today, gone tomorrow. Here today and gone tomorrow. This world keeps turning.
Welcome to Planet Maestro. Yeah, that was kind of cheesy, wasn't it? It's like, you want to buy a used car? How about this Buick I got? You like that?
They'll drag your dreams through the dust till you don't know who to trust.
John may have come in last at our Maestro Lunch Olympics chair racing event last summer, even with a little helping hand from Doug. I don't know where Doug is. But he came in first with his personality, compassion, and work ethic. Work was an important part of John's life. I'd like to share with you part of an email that I received from John exactly 1 month ago today, as I encouraged John to take all the time he needed and not worry about Maestro. Jen, Maestro is my family. I miss my family. I'm so fortunate to have found it. The longer I'm there, the stronger the feelings. It's part of who I am. I want to contribute. I regret that I can't jump in with both feet. I hope to build capacity to take on more. But I want to start down the path and do my share to be part of the family of wonderful people. I come from working people. We measure our self-worth by our work. It may not be the best measure, but I'm too old to figure out any other way. So if that's how John wanted to be measured, let's take his measure through his clients' insights. When we started to reach out to clients that John impacted in the short 2.5 years that he was at Maestro, we came up with a list of over 100 customers. And as we reached out to these individuals, this is what they said. John was a kind and brilliant man. I'm so heartbroken to hear the news. Although I only had a few interactions with him, it was obvious how friendly, well-respected, and knowledgeable he was. I had the privilege of working with John on some projects over the last year. He was great to work with, such passion for producing high-caliber work and having fun while doing it. I learned a lot from him. Thank you, John, for being the person you were, hard worker, honest, and always trying your best for your clients. I had the opportunity to work with John on a project, and the ideas he brought to the table were outstanding. You will be missed, but your legacy will always speak mountains about you. Knowing John was a pleasure, and it is truly sad news. He was a genuine, kind, and thoughtful person with a love of life. I always walked away from being with him thinking, what a great guy, and that he was someone for whom I wished well. I feel blessed for the brief opportunity I had to meet and work with John. To his family, please know that John made a difference in his work and left an impression on me of someone who enjoyed life and all it had to offer. John's clients truly loved him and loved working with him. They found someone who truly cared about their needs and was willing to help work hard to meet them. What's important to note is that John wasn't one man with his clients while he was trying to impress them and someone else with his colleagues. At Maestro, we got the best of John and more. Let me share what's been shared. Amy, who is our art director, worked with John on client work and said this: "It has been a privilege working with him and knowing John. I'll miss grabbing a beer with him after work, being goofy together, talking endlessly about music, and listening to his hilarious stories as a young troublemaker, and seeing him just grin as he would talk about his lovely wife, Lori. One of the most loving, hardworking, goofiest, and warmest friends who will truly be missed by so many. Thanks for always bringing a smile to my face. Miss you, Sadowski. I'm so lucky to have gotten to know you." Tag, one of our sales ambassadors who worked closely with John on various sales engagements and client projects, shared this: "John could build a new friendship in minutes. His depth of knowledge on so many subjects and his passion for life and kindness made him loved and respected by all who had the privilege of knowing him. Lori and family, thank you for sharing your husband and father with a world in desperate need of a great man." Sydney, one of our sales ambassadors who worked closely with John on various sales engagements, expressed these feelings: "John made me laugh every single day. He knew more useless information than anyone I have ever known. He was never afraid to make fun of himself. He was an avid movie quoter. He shared my love of food and trying new spicy eats. He was an adventurer. He lit up when he talked about his wife and children. He spoke with me in crazy accents. He loved a good conversation. He was a rock star. John, I miss you already. Thank you for bringing so much joy to my life." Phil Neal, one of John's strategy colleagues, and Phil and John traveled all over the country together and worked closely at solving client problems, and sometimes in the wee hours of the morning. To John, Phil said, "John, my friend, I miss you. You were awesome to work with, and I loved tackling through client problems that always seemed insurmountable to them, but not to us. We always thought we could figure it out, and most of the time we did. You will be missed. Your willingness to help whenever needed with a thoughtful and caring attitude was so appreciated. You would always say, 'Folks, let's just jump in. We can figure this out.' That never say die attitude was inspiring. We felt there was nothing we couldn't do. I really felt like I had a partner at Maestro, one that would never stop working until the job was done, regardless of the time of day. I'm going to miss our 3 a.m. discussions. More than anything, I'm going to miss our friendship." Annette is our office administrator, and she worked with John both at Pivotal, and he introduced Annette over to Maestro. And Annette shared that John asked me to stop bringing in weekly treats into the office. He told me that his treadmill was complaining. And she continued by saying, "John had a gift with words and an incredible ability to make you feel like family just after 5 minutes. Without him, my life would look very different, and I would be forever grateful to have known him." Doug, one of our interactive developers or designers who worked with John, shared these feelings. "I have so many great memories of John. I wouldn't know where to begin. I loved his humor, his eagerness, and his compassion, a true testament to the word integrity. My best memories of John were heading over to Bell's after the office had emptied out on Friday. Many times it was just the two of us. We would talk about work and life. John never ran out of stories. I will miss his company and his wisdom. He is a father I wish I had and will strive to be." And Zach, our creative director at Maestro, expressed this just yesterday. John, I'm missing you more every day. You didn't know, but I was watching you and learning from you. You were teaching me how to lead, how to serve, and how to bless others while doing it. That's because you modeled it every day. Thanks, dear friend. There are too many things I could say about John, many of which have already been said. His great knowledge, sense of humor, and his ability to connect with people. Even brief messages across the office showed his quick wit. From one of his email communications, he shared, he wanted all of us, often John would take the time to send out messages and want to include everyone in whatever he was up to. And on this particular day, it was Dingus Day. And this was his email. Today is the annual celebration of Dingus Day, an important Polish holiday. Today, boys throw water on girls and swat them with pussy willows. But be careful, because tomorrow girls throw pottery at boys. It's Polish, don't ask. In celebration, let's go to lunch at Louis to eat pierogies, cabbage rolls, and kielbasa. Good Polak food, and it's cheap. Who's in to go to Louis and celebrate Dingus Day like a true dingus? In order to avoid the throngs rushing to Louis for the annual DD Fest, the first Dingus bus will be rolling out at 11:30-ish. If you want to go with a Polish escort, no discounts, advantages, privilege, or warranties included or implied, you can ride in my Matrix. If you've never been there, your life is incomplete. In another email to everyone to wish everyone well for Labor Day, John wrote, I, on the other hand, will not be working, although I am working now, today, or tomorrow. I can be reached today by running over or driving over to my house and tapping me on the shoulder while I'm on my riding mower, analog to be sure, but quite effective. Give me a moment to remove my headphones, turn down the black keys, take the stogie out of my mouth, return the beer to its rightful place in the onboard cup holder. Then I'm all yours. Just be mindful of your toes until you get my full attention. Best to you this Labor Day weekend. There was always something coming back fast from John that made you smile. I loved his wit, but what meant most to me was the very quiet ways he helped me feel more confident and supported as a leader. John would take the time to send me notes, either handwritten or via email, or even a text, to share his support, extend his thanks, or demonstrate encouragement. He built me up. After the 32 years that he was in business for himself, he could have found fault or been critical of my leadership abilities, and instead he provided a very personal gift of bolstering me when I needed it most. An email from John earlier this year, and I've just taken a few parts of it. Jen, I know this has been an excruciating day for you. I could see the toll on your face as the day wore on. I regret that I was not more supportive of you yesterday and last evening, when I'm sure you could have used the support most. You are an excellent leader and commander. Moments like these tend to make us doubt ourselves. Do not fall into that trap. Your leadership and compassion are equally appreciated and responsible for the great company that is Maestro. Thank you for the emotion and commitment you invest on behalf of all of us. Your friend, John. Another email he sent last year, Jen, I love my job and I love the company I work for. I always enjoyed hearing that when I ran my ship. You need to hear it too, and often. Thanks for making both possible, John. And he did make sure that I heard it often. He understood what it was to run a company and just how challenging and lonely that can be sometimes. He always took the time to quietly and encourage and support me. He was willing to do whatever was required. And I know he didn't just do this with me. John took the time to do this with everyone. Great people lift those up around them, and John was indeed a great person. Finally, I'd like to let TAG speak for all of us. TAG worked closely with John on a lot of client projects. This is a message I received from TAG to give to John last week, Monday, while he was in the hospital. Hey, John boy, perk up. All those deals we've been working on recently have been getting signed. All your hard work and strategic thinking continues to pay off, even while you rest. Thank you for everything, John. You're a true friend. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank him too for being a true friend. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to follow that one. But ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, on behalf of my family, I thank you all for bracing the weather and the elements and being here today. I know that for some of you, you've driven from many states away, and I greatly appreciate that. But I see before me more people than I could ever imagine to have been touched by one man's life. My father accomplished this feat by hard work and surrounding himself with good people. He often brought you good people together through the use of laughter. And I'm sure that everyone here has at least one story of him that brings you a small chuckle. And that's the way that he'd like to be remembered. I remember my father as more than just a man. He was my teacher, my hero, and my best friend. For those of you who knew of my relationship with my father, you know that we had our ups and downs like any father and son. But for those of you that don't know, at one point our relationship had almost ended. For years, I could not fathom to what benefit our rocky relationship has brought us. But I now know that without our rocky time apart, we could not have become so close towards the end of his final days. It was his patience, his caring, understanding, and gratitude that allowed us to become so close. And these emotions were not solely reserved for those close to him. He expressed his empathy towards everybody he met because, above all, he wanted to be a good person. Towards the end of his days, while he was reflecting on his own life, we discussed what his favorite feeling was. He told me that his favorite feeling was the relieving laughter at the end of a good cry. And that's the way he wanted to be remembered, not by the sad times or the trying times, but by the times that made you laugh when you needed it the most. Thank you.
Just a couple of minutes ago, I was talking to Lori, and I had to tell her when I met John about 12 years ago, for the longest time I thought he was Jewish. The reason I thought he was Jewish is because we'd get together before we'd go to boat camp and work stuff, and he always talked about Passover and this rabbi guy. So I'm like, he's definitely a Jewish person, so someday I'll meet his rabbi. Well, one day I met his rabbi, and guy cussed a lot, drank a lot. I was like, this guy's not a rabbi. I'll tell you about the rabbi a little later on. Just couldn't help but remember that time. First and foremost, Lori, Jake, and Tess, the fact that you guys asked me to speak for you and John today is an honor to me. I really appreciate it. When I look around the room, and I know that there are people here that have known John longer than I've even been alive, so this is really a privilege. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Bradley Egan. I've been a colleague first and longtime friend of John's for over a decade. What began as a business relationship really became one of the most rewarding, personable, and meaningful relationship I've ever really had in my life with another man. So before I start, I'm positive I'm going to break down a couple of times, so just bear with me, please. You know, it struck me kind of odd, the dumb things that went through my head the other day when Lori asked me if I would do this. What if I say the wrong things? What if I say too much? What if I make a mistake? As I talked to some of our friends today, what the hell are we supposed to wear? You know, the whole time that I knew John wears suits a lot, and I never did. So I thought at the last minute, I'm going to put my suit away. I'm going to put on the jeans that I like to wear. I'm going to try to be comfortable and just go up and talk John for a little while. I have to admit that in worrying about that, I didn't really know what to do for a minute. I was having a hard time, so I reached out to Glenn. I told him that I was having a little bit of trouble, and I just wanted to get this right for John. Glenn chuckled and kind of muttered out a couple of letters. He said WWJD. And as soon as he did that, I burst out laughing because I knew exactly what he meant. What would John do? Well, if I were John, I would have a scotch in my hand and I would be cussing a little bit. I'll spare that for later. That moment of laughter with Glenn helped me clarify my thinking quite a bit. Before that, I had in my mind that I was supposed to paint a perfect picture of a perfect man. But John wasn't perfect. He was flawed just like the rest of us. I had my share of battles with John. They were always about business, never personal. John handled his flawed human nature as well as, and in some cases, better than most people. And really, that's what made John John. He'd make a mistake, and he'd fix it. So thanks, Glenn, for taking a minute to set my mind at ease about that. You guys know as well as I do, there's a lot to say about John. And not sure where to begin, I think I'll just start by describing a man who I dearly love. I brought something heavy duty. I didn't think tissues would cut it. He's honesty and he is fairness. He is toughness and accountability. He is intelligence and wittiness. Resourcefulness and resilience. And above all, he is friendship, loyalty, and laughter. And I choose the present tense of is rather than was because I'm a history buff. And I firmly believe that our history is rather than was. Who we are today is the sum total of experiences we've had, good or bad. Each of us has a shared history with John Sadowski. And through John Sadowski, each of us has been touched by a specific kind of wit and wisdom, laughter and sense of giving that really is hard to find. Each of us has benefited from being loved and known by John. This is going to sound kind of cliche, but John and I used to talk a lot about movies together. And at the risk of being cliche, I can't help but think of the classic film from 1947, It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart plays a compassionate, happy-go-lucky businessman named George Bailey. George operates a family-owned building and loan in a small town of Bedford Falls. George is the good guy, and the bad guy is Henry Potter. That was an accident. Harry Potter. Oh, that's a good one.
Well, that's a twisted tale.
Harry meet Henry, Henry meet Harry. Oh boy. Henry Potter is a greedy, malicious, and nasty old curmudgeon whose sole purpose in life is to steal the last dollar away from Bedford Falls and the Bailey family. Throughout the entire film, George falls in tough times. Mr. Potter plots against him. The Depression basically ruins George's family fortune and wipes out the business. George is basically reduced to begging Mr. Potter, this nasty, terrible person, to save him and his business. Things get so bad for George, he falls into a deep depression. He gets drunk, smashes his Model A into a tree during a snowstorm, stumbles to a bridge where he contemplates jumping in the water. Then George Bailey mutters to his maker, "I wish I had never been born." Believe it or not, an angel appears, a silly old chap named Clarence. And through Clarence, George's horrible wish is granted. During the next act of the film, we see what Bedford Falls, a metaphor for the world, would have been like without George. Bedford Falls became Potterville. Casinos and speakeasies and prostitutes lined the streets where family businesses once stood. Friends turned bitter enemies, and the love of George's life, the beautiful Mary Hatch, is transformed into a frail, anxious, and forgotten old maid. Indeed, the world was a different place without George. But this is real life. And I can't help but say, take a minute and think. What our lives would have been like without John. When John told me he was sick a long time ago, I'm going to quote him. He said, "Bradley, if you tell anybody, I'm going to come over to your house tomorrow and kick your ass." He didn't want anybody to know because he didn't want people feeling sorry for him. You all know who he was that way. But when he reached out to me, I'll never forget that singular instant because everything that he and I had done together, all the people we had met together, all the places we had been just kind of flashed through my mind, and I was grasping for something real and good to say to him, and I just couldn't. I didn't know what to say. So I said, if you'll let me, I just wanted to talk about some of the stuff that we had done together. And he said, Bradley, let's do it, man. Let's talk about it. So we talked about the times that we soared over yachts in the Atlantic Ocean together, or the little sport boats on Torch Lake. We talked about the silly times that we'd spent together doing things we definitely shouldn't have, and since the statute of limitations has expired, I can talk about this. One night at the end of a 15-day boat camp was the last night together, and I'll explain boat camp in a minute. John and I had done a lot of work together. We were tired, but John said to me as we were finishing dinner with the crew, "Bradley, I don't want this night to end for some reason." And I said, "All right, man, let's do something." So we dropped the crew off, and everybody went back to their rooms. John and I grabbed another six-pack, got in the car. We drove around the woods of northern Michigan, just talking about stuff. And I remember that he rolled down the windows of the car that we had rented, and we listened to Elton John and sang songs together like a couple of schoolgirls. It was a lot of fun. I also thought of the quiet moments that I shared with John, cutting down the Christmas trees for his house, trying to stuff these 15-foot tall trees into his front door. Come to think of it, that was actually a lot of fun too. But I just didn't know what to say to John, and I imagine that happened to a lot of you guys. At the end of our conversation, all I could say to him was, "John, I love you, and I'm here if you need anything." Later in the end, I learned from John that hearing that from all of you guys is really the only thing that mattered. And trying to choose the right things to say today, it was difficult for me to separate stories about John and I, things that might not mean anything to all of you. But then I realized something important. The way John treated me as just one person in his life really does speak volumes about the man he was to all of us. So I'm going to jump right in with a few stories about my time with John, stories that I believe really don't have anything to do with me and have everything to do with John. I'll call this one the interview story. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through every single step of it. I first met John during what most people would call a job interview. He was looking for a film and video production company to work with, and I fit the bill. Despite the tough times he had recently overcome with Creative Inc., John was a fighter. He had turned things around, and once again in John's style, he was on the rise. It was the most remarkable job interview of my life. I just plain felt comfortable with the guy the minute I met him. I didn't feel like I was being interviewed or interrogated or vetted or anything like that. Like always, John made things easy on people. Sure, he wanted to see work samples, and yes, he asked me professional questions. But as Becky might recall, we just sat around the conference room and talked. He said he wanted to know the kind of guy I was, not the kind of business I had done. He wanted to know who I was before he let me into his company. So all the things I had rehearsed before the interview, of course, I just threw them out the window. I'm not really sure how it happened, but I told him I wasn't good in groups. I was an independent person. I told him a bunch of off-the-cuff things, that I wouldn't be a good vendor because I prefer collaboration over taking orders. I told him I was a detail freak and I thrived on creativity. I had a propensity to be abruptly honest, and I sometimes, very often, all right, I admit it, most of the time, don't have any patience. I'm not sure why. I even told John that I like to wear black shirts and blue jeans, that I listen to heavy rock and roll music, that my wife Alma was my best friend, and that I would never work on my infant son's birthday. He's 12 now, and I never have. And John helped me with that. I can honestly say that day changed my life. Before meeting John, I never allowed myself to let personal and business relationships mix, really. But hey, man, we're talking about Sadowski here, so how long was that going to last? I really didn't stand a chance when I'm looking at this guy across the table. And I'm really glad that I let my guard down because he made my life better in a lot of ways, and I learned a lot of things from John. I learned that sometimes to be a stronger businessman, you have to be a stronger person. That loyalty can be a rare thing, but it's worth the fight. I also learned that Grey Goose is a hell of a lot better than Absolute. Digress, sorry. Within a matter of days after that first interview, I was given some smaller assignments. John said we were going to try it out. I remember him saying we were going to take baby steps to see if it would work. And that was really his way of saying, I need to see if you're up to snuff, kid. I soon learned Sadowski's definition of baby steps. Here's what he meant. I'm going to hire you to do some stuff, but I'm going to stand right over your shoulder. And I'm going to watch every move you make to ensure you're doing it right. So we started working together. And man, I'm not kidding. He was like right there, right next to me. He was in the editing suite making sure I was doing it right. I mean, I liked the guy from day one, but I was really unnerved by this close proximity thing he had going on with me. So I mustered up the nerve and I said, John, when we're done today, we have to go out and get some drinks. We need to talk about this. And then I said to him, I don't know if you're a teetotaler, so if you'd prefer, you can have tea, but we need to talk. We didn't have tea, but we did talk. I'll cut to the chase. I told this guy whom I'd only known for a very short time at the point that I thought he was wasting his money, and I definitely knew that he was wasting his time. I told him if he was going to supervise me like that, and I said with all due respect, it's your company and it's your clients, but if you're going to sit there and supervise me like that, you need to find someone else, or you need to trust me. I remember the precise moment that those words left my mouth. I thought, stop, come back. Did you really say that? Before I had a chance to slink back in my chair and recoil in fear of hearing the words, you're fired, jerk, he looked me straight in the face and he said, you know what, Bradley? You're right. We went on to talk through it, and from that day forward, I knew that John was the real deal. My respect for him went from the obligatory kind of respect this guy because he's hiring you to I respect this man because he's a good human being. The baby steps turned into sprints. John asked me to take over on a boat camp shoot. And that's his way of describing a long video and photography production process involving long days, sunburns, helicopters, a lot of boats, but a whole lot of fun. It was a really good year for all of us, and as luck would have it, there were going to be 2 boat camps that year, so I was feeling good. My immediate reaction to John asking me to take one over was awesome. This is going to be great. And then it hit me square in the face. I mean, John had years of business in the boating industry, and he was known around town as the boat guy. So truthfully, I was scared out of my wits. I knew that I was going to Florida, and I was going to have some big shoes to fill, because the client knew John, was really comfortable with John, and I was kind of scared about trying to wear those shoes. When I got down to Florida, I knew exactly the kind of shoes I had to fill, because, I mean, they were right there again, standing right next to me. It was a good thing, though. He wanted to come down to make sure everything went smoothly, and I'm really glad he did, because that particular project we worked on was riddled with all kinds of unforeseeable issues that none of us could have controlled. John exhibited what I referred to as 2 o'clock in the morning, on your feet type thinking. I mean, for starters, flights were delayed. We got in late. As soon as we got to Florida, we learned the talent or the models that we needed to work with, for whatever reason, weren't coming. To top it off, we were supposed to load our equipment onto boats, yet the exclusive community that we were working in didn't like our production truck and wouldn't let us get near the water. We'd have to hoof our stuff a long ways, and there was a lot of it, almost a quarter mile, actually. It was unseasonably hot and humid, even for Florida. The water wasn't calm. There was a whole host of other things going against us. And there was John, cool as a cucumber. It was my first boat camp with the boat guy, and all this was going on. I was quietly freaking out inside, you know. And what did John do? Ordered a couple of pivotal pies, his culinary creation of jalapenos, bacon, pineapple, pepperoni, and of course, more jalapenos. We had an emergency production meeting, tried to figure out what to do about the shoot. Here's what I said to John. There's no talent, terrible access, insane water conditions, etc. I just rambled on. John just looked at all of us and said, you know what, I've been here before. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to the nearest restaurant, bar, or shopping area closest to the waterfront, and we're going to scout talent. Everything else will work itself out. So at this point, my mouth is stuffed full of pizza, my lips are burning from the jalapenos, and I blurt out, yeah, right, you expect me to walk into a bar and go up to some attractive couple and say, hey, you want to be in our film shoot? I mean, I was thinking I would get punched or arrested. But you know what? He was right. We had to do that, and it worked. Later that day, we were lugging our gear back from the parking lot to the docks, and he was getting impatient because it was taking too long. I put in bold print here, uncharacteristically. It was the only time this ever happened between John and I, but uncharacteristically, he cussed at my guys. He wanted us to hurry up, and he was frustrated, so he cussed at us. I asked him if we could take one of my discreet walks around the backside of a building because I wanted to talk to him. And here I went again with my big mouth. I told him, hey man, you can cuss around me all you want. I know we're behind because all this stuff is happening, but you can't cuss at my guys. Cuss at me and I'm out of here. I told him that. I don't know why I told him that. I think it's, again, because I felt comfortable with John. But I told him a few other things, and I'll move on. I wanted to tell this story because I believe in my heart it summarizes something of John. He was quick on his feet, smarter than hell, resourceful, and above all, he was fair. He was kind, self-effacing, and gracious. Here I was, some dumb kid, basically, getting in his face on his turf. Yet he accepted responsibility for what he had done. He apologized to the guys, and we never looked back. Oh, and by the way, that pizza we ordered, the Pivotal Pie, we couldn't afford to stay in a nice hotel because it was too expensive. So we were about 20 miles down the street, basically in a roadside motel, shacking up. Didn't even have refrigerators in the room. So John put the pizza in the back of the rental car. I got up at dark 30 the next morning to start working before sunup. And there he was, leaning on the back of the rental car, eating day-old pizza that he put in the trunk of a rental car overnight in Florida. I was looking at him like, all I had to say was, the man had an iron gut. He offered me a slice, and I respectfully declined. That's a Johnism. A lot of Johnisms come to mind when I looked around just a minute ago. Dark 30, that was his way of saying, go to bed early because we're getting up early. In a lot of cases, we never went to bed. We just stayed up and turned that 2-week thing into a day. Pivotal Pies, Crank Specials, Boat Camp, Primitive Man Go Boating, a few finely crafted cuss word phrases, more jalapenos, or depending on the time of day, more olives, please. Another quick story, 22 olives for $22. He was one of the smartest people I ever met, and he was always able to keep his cool, except for one time I can remember, but I had it coming and I don't want to go there. With his wits about him almost at all times, I have to admit I witnessed the day that John Sadowski had met his match. He was outsmarted by a waiter in Knoxville, Tennessee. You see, John and I had been traveling all over the country together for a client many years ago. New Hampshire, Fresno, California, northern Michigan. We were all over the place and ended up in Knoxville. When the final shoot day wrapped, we got cleaned up and walked over to a place overlooking the Tennessee River. The waiter came, we ordered some stuff. John said, I want a martini with a couple extra olives. The kid didn't get what he meant. A few minutes later, he brought us our calamari and sliders. There was a big problem. There were only 2 olives in this martini. John politely quipped, no, I really like olives. And with his subtle charm, he encouraged the kid to bring out a couple more by stating, I tip by the olive. Moments later, the waiter returned with a fresh jar of the biggest, greenest olives you've ever seen. I mean, the whole damn jar. There were 22 huge olives in this thing. John laughed so hard that I thought he was going to rupture a blood vessel. He told me that it was actually not the first time that it had happened to him, which surprised me. Then he told me that he liked the kid's style. The point is, we later finished the dinner. When we got done, he left a regular tip with his company credit card. And true to form, John left an extra $22 in cash, $1 for each olive. I tell you this story because I believe John Sadowski was a man of his word. Even to strangers, John's infectious personality touched the lives of people he really didn't know that well. I was recently talking with Doyle Vanderpool, and he reminded me of a story where a waitress remembered not only John's name, but his favorite meal and beverage. The telling part about this is that John hadn't been to this restaurant, Maggie's Tavern, up in Cadillac, for a few years. But Mary, the waitress, remembered John because, well, that's just the kind of guy John was. Always able to get to know someone, no matter who they were. John left an impression on everyone. And I really struggled with telling this story because it's one of the last things I wanted to say, and it's really personal between really John, myself, and pivotal at the time, Lisa. John was a selfless, observant, kind, and giving friend. About 7 years ago, my wife and I were expecting our second child. It was a few days before Christmas, and I was supposed to keep this a secret, but John always stopped over to my house to give me a Christmas present, just as he had done the years before and after. Only this time, he noticed something wasn't right with Alma. He stayed and visited for a while, and a few minutes after he left, he called me and he said, "Bradley, I don't want to get into your business, but is everything okay?" I hadn't told anybody that she was pregnant yet, not even my parents. Things weren't going well from the start. I told him I was scared, and he sensed something was wrong. Soon thereafter, our doctors told us to expect the worst. Eventually, she was ordered to bed rest and was experiencing a whole lot of complications that made it impossible for me to do anything as a good husband but be by her side. At that point, I was working on a retainer basis with John at Pivotal. I remember one day I called him and I said, "John, I'm not going to be able to come into work for a while." And he said, "How long?" And I said, "Months." And he asked me if it had to do with Alma, and I said it did. I told him that I was going to have to focus on her instead of the work, and that I expected him to stop paying my retainer because I wasn't going to be able to earn my keep. By this point in our relationship, I had known John very well. I knew the kind of guy he was, and I expected him to be supportive of me. But his enormous act of kindness humbles me even to this day when I think about it. He stopped over to my house a couple days later and asked me how I was doing. I spilled my guts about being scared for my family, for my wife, for my unborn child. That the whole thing had me freaked out, and for some reason I just blurted out that some SOB just hit my mailbox and I can't even get mail. Not that that mattered. True to form, John came over to my house the next day with a post hole digger, and he helped me install a new mailbox. When we were out there pouring the cement, he told me that he was going to keep paying my retainer because he knew that I'd make it up to him. Looking back on it, I guess I reacted a little defensively, and I'm sorry about that, John. Sure, I was scared about the whole situation, her health, financial stuff, and all that. And I argued with him that it wasn't right. He had a business, and he had employees, and he had a family too. But instead, he told me that it wasn't my decision to make, that it was his. And he made the decision, since I now, as he put it, had a proper mailbox to receive the damn checks. He always, no matter what, figured out something funny to say, didn't he? It was supposed to be private between him and me and Lisa at the time, and until now I kept it that way. Our little girl is a first grader now. She's 6 and in perfect health. Although I repaid John every penny by working extra when my wife was better, I don't know if he ever fully comprehended what that meant. The kind of generosity that he showed my family when I needed him most. I shared that story with all of you because it speaks directly to the heart of John Sadowski. You know, just like Jake said a couple of weeks ago, he shared something with me. He told me that one of his favorite feelings was the good laugh after a hard cry. He said that humor made life worth everything. And he said that I should never forget to laugh as much as I can. He went on to tell me how humbled he was by the outpouring of support from people like you. And the very last time that I talked to John, he told me that again, how much he appreciated that so many people were there by his side. He said to me, and I'll never forget this, "I guess you don't know how much people care for you when times are good and things are okay. And that life can mess things up and make it hard to see that." I told him that I hoped that he knew how much he is loved and how much he's affected all of us in a good way. He kind of smiled and said, "I guess when you're doing your thing, you don't know you're doing it until something big happens." Something big happened in all of our lives. We got the chance to know an extraordinary man whose sense of humor, wit, and compassion for other people has left an indelible mark on all of our hearts. He was in many ways, to many of us, a teacher and a mentor. The kind of guy that always made you feel like you were in it together. Something big happened to all of us the day we met John. And something big happened to all of us the day we had to say goodbye. Thanks.
I really didn't know the guy. I didn't like him. Before I start, what I would like to do is acknowledge, first of all, Lori for allowing me to spend as much time with John as I could, especially since he was diagnosed 6 months ago. Secondly, I want to acknowledge my wife, Diane, who has been side by side with me through this most difficult time for me personally. And she's been there, she's been supportive and loving, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank Maestro. The generosity of Maestro is second to none. I really do. Now, I know Doyle's in the house. Doyle from Four Winds, right? All right. My family is not going to like this, Doyle, but I'm going to do it anyway. Huh? Don't break it. No, this is a Four Winds. And I wear this a lot to the point that my family wants to burn it. And I wear it because, number one, it's comfortable. Number two, that John did it years ago. And when he gave it to me, when he gave it to me, I put it on. I like it. I thought I was the only one. Until John. Until less than a week before he passed away, on a Friday, Lori and I took him back from the hospital. And Bindi, former employee who lives in Troy, was visiting family in Coldwater. She heard about John. She wanted to come up to see him. And John we just literally got him home. She was at the door, and they were heading back to Troy, and she had a sweet little baby. I mean, I don't know how old the baby was, but just not very old. But it meant that much to her and to her husband to come over to Battle Creek on their way to Troy from Coldwater. And John got out of his clothes, and albeit slowly, and he came out, and he had one of these on. And I looked at him, and I thought I was special. You know, I thought, gee whiz, John, all these years I thought I was the guy. And I said, John, you've got one too. He says, yeah, aren't they comfortable? and I let it go. So that's why I'm wearing this. Now, everyone who knows me knows I'm not technologically very good here at computers, phones, you name it. So bear with me. Okay, I've got it, folks. Just hang in there. See, I never went to work for John. There's reasons why. I can't get the speaker on, but it's John's voicemail. And it just said, "Hi, this is John, leave a message." That's what I wanted to start this with. Sorry, John, but you know me. Can't get it together. A great man once said, "Death is a part of life. I've always convinced myself, but I never let myself grieve." Why? Death is part of nature. Grieving is useless. It's like feeling sorry for a daybreak or a thunderstorm or birth. My personal philosophy is that we all come from the same great intelligence, whether we are human, animal, or plant. The life force is universal. We are all privileged to carry a small piece of it for a while. When the end comes, that life force reunites with where it began, enhancing the collective by virtue of its return. Nature doesn't waste anything, so why should it waste something as precious as life? That great man I just quoted was John Sadowski. It's really interesting because I didn't know what the other speakers were going to say, but there is a common theme here. And the one I was going to talk about, greatness. Greatness defined. There's many definitions of greatness, but one definition that fits John is of noble or lofty character. John was noble with lofty character. We talked about different traits here. Humility. He never bragged about himself or his achievements. Even when he had many life achievements, successes in business, the birth of his children, the marriage to his lovely wife, Lori, never bragged about it. Sorry, Lori, never bragged about it. The accomplishments of his own business. I remember when it was a roller coaster for John. And life is a roller coaster. And for his business was a roller coaster. And when he was down, but he'd always be that little engine that could and chug up that hill like all of us do in our lives, in one capacity or another. And I remember going to a function at Pivotal, and it might have been Creative Inc. You know, he had to switch names. I don't know why, if the feds were after him or what, but I really know why, but it's just a joke, folks. I'm not. But anyway, he was really, really rocking and rolling with his business, and he'd always invite me to these functions. And I like being invited to those functions. So when I would talk to him, take him aside, and I said, "John, I'm so happy for you. I am happier for you and your success more so than any success that I could ever have for myself." And he'd look at me and go, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah, really." The Sunday night before he passed away, early Thursday morning, Lori and I were in the emergency room with him, and the doctor was basically telling him, you know, he's not going to have much longer to live. So Lori was out making phone calls, and I had the ability and the privilege of standing next to him, holding his hand, and he was with it then. And I was holding his hand, and he would go to sleep and then wake up and go to sleep and wake up. And we would talk, obviously not when he was sleeping. And I held his hand. It was like 40 minutes I was standing there, and I told him how much I loved him. I told him it was a privilege being with him. I told him I'm going to be miserable without him. And I told him he was a pillar of the foundation of my life. As corny as that sounds, that was truly what I meant and what he meant to me. And he looked at me and he went, "Really?" And I'm going, I'm thinking to myself, give me a break, guy. I mean, come on, I'm pouring my soul out to you. Whatever. The best you can say is, "Really?" Respect for others. That's another trait of greatness, respect for others. No matter if you were a CEO, and he dealt with CEOs in a lot of companies, or whether you were the person sweeping the office of the CEO, he treated you the same. There was no socioeconomic barrier or anything like that. John treated everyone the same. And that is remarkable in this day and age in life in general. He truly was a remarkable human being, and that's part of his greatness. Another part was empathy, and Bradley mentioned selflessness. That's another characteristic of greatness. The memory that I have was about 5 weeks ago when I came over. He wanted me to come over to the house, and Lori's cousin Scott and Maria were there, and John's sister Kathy, and we were sitting around in the living room having some beers and drinks and what have you, and telling funny stories and jokes. And I wasn't going to tell this joke. I'm going to tell it probably a little bit later. I'm not going to be long, but I'm going to, because Bradley opened it up. Who is the rabbi, by the way? You never mentioned who the rabbi
I
was.
didn't finish that. He was a pilot named Paul Barth. It was a move we did.
Okay, all right.
Passovers.
Anyway, okay.
The movie was called The Passover.
So he's rabbi the pilot. He's the pilot who's a rabbi.
He wasn't even a rabbi. He just named him that.
Okay, all right. My question is, was he a pilot?
He was a pilot.
Okay. But we were all sitting around telling jokes and laughing, and John was talking about stories about Bernard Denard, and Kathy's, his sister's going, "Oh, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it." And we were laughing so hard, and I was sitting next to John, and I looked over, and he's just laughing so hard. And it was just so wonderful. It was so cathartic. The next day, he wanted to go to the store, so I pick him up, and I put him in the car, we're going to the store. And this is where I get into selflessness and empathy. I'm driving, and he's sitting there, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "Glenn," he says, I probably shouldn't go this way, but I hope you don't mind," which is very soft, John, getting ready to tell you, "Hey, this is bugging me." And he said, "I've noticed you've been drinking too much." 'Cause when I'd go over to the house, I'd go right to his beer and have a couple beers. That was my way of coping with what I was dealing with this is, for me, a loss, obviously. So he says, "I'm just concerned." He had his hand on my shoulder, and I looked at him and I said, "I understand that." I said, selfishly, I said, "This is the way I'm dealing with what's going on with you." And I said, "Don't worry about it. I'm okay." He says, "You are?" He says, "Yep, I'm okay." I said, "Last night was a catharsis for me. We were all laughing, we were all having a great time, and we got through that. And that to me was huge." And he said, "Good, I'm glad." And then we proceeded to go get light bulbs at 10 different places. Integrity, bar none. There was not a man that I've met in my life who was as honest as John. His word was his bond, whether it was a business situation or whether or not it was a personal situation. He was a man of his word. And when I say that, people say that about a lot of people. He really was. He really was. Passion for for what he believed in. He believed in his work. He believed in his family. He believed in his friends. He believed in humanity and kindness. And Kathy shared this story with me, he came from a family that was a loving family that gave him the capacity for kindness, for humility, for love. His father was John Michael Sadowski Sr. John was not a junior. Probably didn't like it, but they used to call him Big John and Little John. And when Patty, the oldest sister, needed shoes, and they were struggling, the father needed work shoes. And he said, no, you get shoes for Patty, and he put cardboard in his shoes so it could continue to work. That was John's dad. Mother the same way. That gave him the foundation for living the life he lived, that we're all celebrating today and that we all know and love John about. One of the things he would do with his business is they get toys for tots, right, Becky? You guys would go out and get toys for tots for kids a lot and do things of that nature. He wouldn't go to the local press and say, okay, my business is doing this. He didn't want the fanfare. He was doing it from his heart and from his soul. That's John. John's last birthday, I either called him or texted him, happy birthday, how you doing, buddy, blah, blah, blah. And he texted me this. Again, this is John. He said, thanks, Glenn. I want to tell you how different my life would be if I had never met you. You are the best friend I have ever had. You are my brother. I love you for who you are. You touch so many people's lives. You make my life richer. Here's a man who's dying, telling his buddy, this is what you mean to me. That's John. John was an entrepreneur of kindness, love, generosity of spirit, soulfulness, and humor. And that humor, huh? That humor. It started at a young age. Apparently, Kathy told me a story about, and John, if you know the hierarchy, John was a baby. There was no boys, just two older sisters, and they were years apart. And so John was probably spoiled rotten. And so I think the sisters didn't like that. So when he was 2 years old, they dressed him up in a pink dress. Okay. And so, he was peering around the corner to see if his dad would, because and his dad would see him, and I think your dad laughed about it, and
So they were out.
You were babysitting. So you didn't do it. But did he ever see it?
Who?
Your dad.
Oh, yeah, they came in. And
Right.
Patty and I were teaching around.
Right. And did they laugh?
Yeah.
Yeah, they laughed. Right. Right. And ever since then, John's been a cross-dresser. No, I'm just kidding. When we would go out, when we would go out to dinner or lunch or whatever, he and I just shared so much of life with each other together that we'd always argue over the tab, and I always want to pick up the tab. I'm a control freak, and he doesn't want to pick. He wants to pick up the tab because he doesn't want anybody carrying his weight. So we always had this struggle. And so when he was going through hormonal treatment for the cancer, we'd go out to lunch, we'd go out after work, whatever it was, and I would pick up the tab. And one of the last times I picked up the tab, he looked at me and smiled, and he says, I'm getting used to this, and if this hormonal therapy keeps working, this is going to be well worth it. One of the things, and I'm going to keep this story short because I think probably a lot of you heard the Meatloaf concert story, but Ken is here, right, Ken? Where's Ken? Yeah. Huh? Yeah, they're here. Ken was, John and Joanne were John and Lori's neighbor on Sumac. And Ken and I like Meatloaf. The music, not we like Meatloaf, but I mean the musician. John hated him, hated his music. And so Ken and I say, hey, we're pumped up. I'll go get tickets, Ken, blah, 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 blah. And then Ken bails out on me at the last second. So I get on my knees, John, come on. So finally he goes, all right. So I pick him up, and I had an old white Lincoln Town Car. So we're driving, and I'm looking at him, and I'm going, well, I haven't been to a concert in a long time. Have you? He says, no. He says, well, why don't we go to the first bar we see and start there, and we'll go to the concert. So we had a couple drinks at the bar, pull in, go see the concert, pulling out, Wing Stadium. We can't find this white Lincoln Town Car. Now, you got to understand, this is a Meatloaf concert. I don't think there's too many people driving a white Lincoln Town Car. So we can't find the car. But what we did find was a buddy of mine happened to be there that I didn't know, who had his, from Grand Rapids, who had his trunk open. And he was standing around waiting for traffic to leave. And I went, this is perfect. So we hung around there, and guess what? The traffic left, and we found the Lincoln. So I said, well, let's go to Nob Hill. They got a great jukebox. He says, all right. So we went to Nob Hill, we got to close that place down. Then I said, listen, we can't go home on this date unless we go to Denny's. At 3 o'clock in the morning. So that was our Meatloaf day. But John just went along with it. He was cool to it. He couldn't stand his music. Could you imagine going to a concert with somebody you can't stand? John was hip to it. He was fine with it. John brought the best out of people in life, and he's bringing out the best out of people in his passing. Look at the people here, the people who couldn't make it because of the weather. We all have a part of John with us. We're all going to keep going on in life, having John's spirit in some form or fashion with us. And that's really a blessing for all of us. John, if you remember, had a dog, Mortimer, which was, they always had to have, John and Lori always had to have fancy dogs. I don't know what the gig was at. This dog had wrinkles all over it, and I used to call him Wrinkles. And, but it was Mortimer, and Mortimer was John's best buddy. And Mortimer tragically got run over by a car. And he wrote the next day about losing Mortimer, his good friend, about grieving. This is what John said. I lost a good friend today. Vigilant, loyal, brave, sweet, and although the need never arose, I am sure he would lay down his life to protect mine. He protected my family. He made them feel safer. His bark was ferocious for those he didn't know. His licks and nuzzles were generous for those he did. I hope that I can be as good of a friend to those I care about as he was to me. I lost a good friend today. Well, John, we lost a good friend today, and it's you. And John and Lori used to go to movies all the time. I think you guys would go to the cinema at 8 in the morning and leave at midnight. Movie after movie. And one of the movies that I'm sure you're all familiar with is Castaway. Tom Hanks movie where his plane crashed, deserted on an island. He has a volleyball that's Wilson. That's how he hangs on to his life, and that's his good buddy. Well, John, Hanks had his Wilson, and John had his Mortimer. And I had John. Another great man said, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. That great man was Nelson Mandela, who happened to pass away the same day that John did. John made a difference in everyone and in anyone he came in contact with. Voltaire once wrote, cultivate thy own garden. John did that, and what a beautiful garden he cultivated. John did that with love, kindness, and humor, His garden was a rainbow of beautiful experiences and memories that made a difference in all who met him or knew him. John, we all were blessed to walk through the garden of your life. You have left quite a legacy, my friend. You will always be with me. I love you. Take care.
Sun comes round, good Lord has blessed me well. They to put my plow to the ground, into bed when the sun retires, and then I'll see your face lit now by candlelight. But all I see is just this sunny weather, and all I need is the one I love. So Lord, please bless me with some time together, and I won't ask for any more after all. Around the bend, we're past Clarksville Station there, down by the river's end. Heard tales from far away, but that's where the stars are by, down where the angels lay. But all I see is just this sunny weather, and all I need is the one I love. So Lord, please bless me with some time together, and I won't ask for any more after all. After all is said and done, after all is come and gone, but all I see is just this stormy weather, and all I need is the one I love. So Lord, please bless me with some time together, and I won't ask for any more after all.